Let's go! Welcome to the sweatiest show of them all, The Sweat. We are your hosts for the next hour, just dripping with joy. Jessie, Coffield, Emerson, Lotzia.
And we had ourselves a wild and dramatic NFL trade deadline today. So we're bringing in DK Live Steve Buchanan and Ryan Collingsworth of the Action Network to give us the fantasy impact of each of these moves.
All right, Steve-O. Denver ships off wide receiver Demaryius Thomas to the Texans for a 4th and 7th round pick. How do you see him fitting in with Houston here?
Yeah, I think this is such an excellent landing spot for him. It gives the Texans a viable option in 3 wide receiver sets with Will Fuller out of the mix. Look, he's not going to replace Fuller. He doesn't have the speed or the deep threat abilities, but he's an upgrade in that offense, no less, however you slice it there. And I think he's going to be very productive in this offense. If you look at what the Texans have left on their schedule, there is some huge games that he can produce in here. I mean, they're facing the Redskins, the Browns, the Jets, the Eagles. Those are some of the ones that just pop off, and catch the eye there. On the other side there for the Broncos, you have to love this spot for Sutton. I mean, this is a team that throws a ton, but we shouldn't get too excited yet. We also remember that Sutton has only caught 48% of the targets on the season, but in the same breath, you can also say he's averaging over 19 yards per reception. I think it's a great move all around for both teams. And I think we're going to see a nice resurgence for DT.
What do you think here, Stone Cold? Good move here for Demaryius Thomas?
I don't think from a fantasy perspective his value is going to change much. I think this trade mostly is a signal that the Houstons are prepared for a schematic shift on offense, because Thomas at his best in his peak was no better than a mid 4.5s kind of guy. He never burns you with the speed. So we shouldn't view this as a direct replacement for Fuller, who is a sub 4.4 guy who ran a lot of seam routes, deep field stretcher, one of the best in the league. Thomas, on the other hand, is kind of like a 13 to 14 yard depth of target kind of guy, more the intermediate route. So I think we could see a lot more flood concepts, which I think in the long run is actually going to benefit DeAndre Hopkins maybe a little more than it would have previously.
Hey, Ryan, looking back at Denver, though, whose value increases, whose value takes a hit now that Thomas is gone?
Well, Steve hit it, and everybody else in the universe is all over it with Courtland Sutton, obviously. So that's kind of a given. I'll give one name that I think may go under the radar a little bit, and that's Deshaun Hamilton, another rookie wide receiver on their roster out of Penn State. He, of all of their talent kind of waiting in the wings, has seen the most overall play. And with Sutton as a dedicated number 2 option, I think he could rotate to the slot reasonably admirably. So he could get some extended run, and I don't know, maybe worth kind of a depth consideration.
Hey, Steve, is Emmanuel Sanders going to see more looks? He seems to be the favorite target of his quarterback already, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just going to be business as usual for Sanders. I mean, he was the number 1 receiver with DT. He'll be the number 1 receiver without him. So I think it's just not going to change for him, and maybe he'll get a few more. But, I mean, he was the number 1 to begin with, so that doesn't really change much for me.
Cool.
All right, guys, well, the Lions trade wide receiver Golden Tate to the Eagles for a 3rd-round pick. So, Ryan, Tate's been averaging nearly 18 DK fantasy points a game. What fantasy impact is he going to have on, other playmakers on this Philly offense?
I feel like Nelson Aguilar is screwed because in recent weeks, first off, Aguilar has sucked, kind of playing outside through the course of his career, all things considered. They've played him at the slot 62% of all snaps this season, and Tate is about to take his job outright in the slot. Jordan Matthews, we saw pop last game, again, operating outside as opposed to inside. So I feel like this is sort of an indictment of Aguilar, and we should kind of be very, very cautious with him moving forward. I don't think that Alshon Jeffrey is affected massively. Ertz could see a target or 2 drop as a result of this, but I think Tate's still going to be himself.
Hey, do you agree with Ryan on this one, Steve?
Oh, totally. I mean, good to know you, Nelson. We'll see you somewhere else. I mean, he's pretty much done for the season, but I feel like, this is so good just for the whole team overall. I mean, look at who Wentz has to throw to now. He has Tate in the mix, and now he has with Jeffrey and Ertz. I mean, what a tangent you can throw to there. But if we talk about the Detroit side as well, there's a 26.6 target share market that has to be made up now, and that just is going to pay dividends for guys like Kenny Golladay. I think TJ Jones hasn't really been mentioned much either, but I think he should start getting some looks there as well. But, I mean, this was my favorite deal of the day, and I think it was a lot for everybody just to think about Tate and this offense. I mean, he's just going to be someone you're going to be looking at each and every week if you weren't already. But what a deal here for the Eagles. This is a total win-now mentality that they have right now, and this is going to be a fun offense to watch for the rest of the season.
Well, Steve, back in Detroit, you mentioned a couple guys who might see a bigger role now that Tate is gone. But does Matt Stafford's value take a hit there?
I mean, really, Stafford hasn't really been impressive to begin with, and now he loses arguably his best receiver. I mean, he's going to be relying a lot on Marvin Jones and, like I said, Kenny Golladay. So I feel like, it's definitely a downgrade for Stafford, but I mean, you can't go much below what he's been already. He hasn't really been that impressive. So absolutely, it takes a huge hit for Stafford.
Ryan, do you agree with that? You feel like those guys might see bigger roles and you're not really caring much, perhaps, about Stafford's role?
Yeah, Stafford's not necessarily on my radar. I think Marvin Jones's role approximately stays the same. He's already one of the deepest route runners, deepest, average depth of target in the NFL, that kind of guy already. I don't expect that to change massively. I think Golladay gets the biggest boost here. Steve already mentioned TJ Jones, and I'll just throw in Theo Riddick as well, who's likely to get some time at the slot. He's been disappointing this season. And I'm afraid that he and TJ Jones are going to end up cannibalizing that usage, and we're not going to see a huge benefit there for either of them. I think Galladay's the big winner there.
All righty, Ty Montgomery's final act in a Packers uniform was a fumble that cost his team and Aaron Rodgers a shot at a comeback against the undefeated Rams. He's now a Raven, traded from Green Bay in exchange for a 7th-round pick in 2 years. You see him eating into Alex Collins's or maybe Buck Allen's fantasy value here, Steve?
Well, I mean, we mentioned Stone Cold earlier. We should say DTA, don't trust Aaron, because if you cross him, see you later. You're packing it out of town. I mean, how quick was that Montgomery is gone here? But yeah, I feel like this really goes into the targets for Buck Allen. I mean, I feel like Montgomery is miles ahead of Buck Allen in terms of skill set and things like that. So I feel like Montgomery is going to have a huge part in this offense here. He's not going to get a lot of rushes. Alex Collins feels like he has that down there. But the Ravens obviously feel like they have something here in Montgomery. I mean, he's just really had such a strange season for the Green Bay Packers. This is someone who was essentially their savior last year. I feel like all the big games that he has, and now he's just completely fallen off the radar. So he's going to get a fresh start here with the Ravens, and I feel like he definitely contribute. But yeah, I think this is really bad news for Buck Allen.
You think that this fresh start does something for Ty Montgomery's fantasy value here, Ryan? He's only had 2 games this year with double-digit fantasy points.
Yeah, I think that's going to stay the same. I think Ty Montgomery's pretty much done, at least for this season. I haven't seen anything from him this year that makes me believe going to Baltimore is going to change anything. And to be honest with you, Marty Mornhinweg, the OC in Baltimore, he has a long track record of using 2 to 3 running backs and basically kind of screwing all of them from a fantasy perspective by splitting up usage in really miserable ways for fantasy owners. So I think Alex Collins is the guy to own of that group. I think they wouldn't have made this move unless they had doubts about Buck Allen, but I don't really see the potential in Montgomery either. So I think this kind of just sucks overall.
Hey, but Ryan, in the land of cheese, how will Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams benefit?
I think what's going to happen there is we're going to see kind of more of a traditional 1-2 backfield committee there with Jones on the early downs and Jamal Williams kind of naturally sliding over into a 3rd down role and receiving usage role, especially because they believe he's a better pass blocker overall. The biggest concern, again, for both of them, even if Montgomery was there, is that the Packers throw the ball 5th most in the NFL. So it's not like there's huge rushing volume coming for either of them down the road. So I don't know that it changes anything dramatically. It maybe buoys their week-to-week production, but I don't think it changes their season-long projections drastically.
Yeah, Steve, you just heard Ryan mention how much these guys throw the football. So does anything really change with Jones or Williams? I mean, they were having a hard time kind of balancing these 3 guys in the backfield.
I mean, I don't really think so because Montgomery really wasn't getting that many opportunities to begin with. So now, you take out a couple shares that he had. I don't really think it's going to benefit anyone as much. But, as Ryan was saying, I mean, that's just how it's going right now. They're going to go with that 1-2 combination. So I feel like it's good overall for the production, but you don't really have to worry about Montgomery coming in and maybe vulturing a touchdown or whatever. But, yeah, I don't really think it changes much for Green Bay.
All right, you two are free to go for now, but don't go far. We need you for some waiver wire fun coming up. But first, some NBA high or low after this. It's your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. I'm Taryn Azak. We're talking about a showdown contest tonight with 2 of the best teams in the East, the Raptors and the 76ers. Both teams playing in their 2nd game of a back-to-back as the Sixers beat the Hawks last night and the Raptors were handed their first loss of the season by the Bucks. Toronto's depth couldn't come through as they were missing their star man, Kawhi Leonard. Leonard is set to return to action tonight, and you can roster him at $17,100 as your captain or $11,400 as your flex. The Sixers had a season-best 64 rebounds, including a season-high 16 offensive boards against Atlanta. Ben Simmons had a monster game. He recorded his 5th double-double in 6 games while pouring in a season-high 21 points. He did all that in just 27 minutes, so he likely won't be too worn down for tonight's matchup in Toronto. Simmons is a good option in the showdown at $16,200 in the captain spot if you don't want to pay up $18,000 for Joel Embiid. Sixers go for 3 straight, while the Raptors look to stay undefeated at home. Tip-off is at 7:30. What up, ballers? Time to talk basketball with Julian Edlow of DK Live, Nick Whalen of RotoWire, and the Action Network's Matt LaMarca. Cop that Action Network app, now available on both iPhones and Androids, Matt, if you didn't know.
All right, gentlemen, will the following players go higher or lower than their last game's output?
Oh, NBA higher or lower.
Yeah,
wow.
It's pretty self-explanatory here. We make it very easy for everyone at home. Thunder guard Russell Westbrook, $10,500, had 49.75 fantasy points in the team's last game Sunday. That was against Phoenix. Matt, will he go higher or lower than that total tonight against the Clippers?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard not to like the over here. I think even the staunchest Westbrook hater would have to admit that this is a pretty low bar for him to clear. He averaged over 60 DraftKings points per game during the regular season last year. So I think asking him to get 50 is pretty reasonable tonight. His usage rate has remained high through his first 3 games, 33.5%. But his overall scoring has been dragged down a bit because he can't buy a three-pointer at the moment. He's shooting less than 10% from three-point range,
which
goodness. I think I could do better than that. I feel pretty confident.
No, you could not. I can.
Oh, come on.
You could not.
Sam Presti, give me a call. Let's find out.
Okay.
He's still a monster in the peripheral categories, 12 rebounds and 7.7 assists per game. Does have a slightly difficult matchup with the Clippers, but the Thunder still have the 3rd highest implied team total on the slate. So, give me all the Westbrook at 10,500, and I think he should easily get over 50.
Nick, you saying give me all the Westbrook as well?
I went back and forth on this one. I think he probably comes in right around 50. I know there's a sense of urgency here, certainly for OKC with the way that they've started out. Russ hasn't played particularly well statistically and certainly in terms of efficiency through these first 3 games, just 1 of 11 from 3. As was just mentioned, he's got at least 5 turnovers in all 3 games. So that's just something you kind of have to live with when it comes to evaluating Russell Westbrook. But what concerns me is this matchup. The Clippers have 2 perimeter defenders in Avery Bradley and Patrick Beverley, 2 guys they can throw at Russell Westbrook. Both can kind of alternate. Both have the right type of size, the right type of tenacity that you want going up against Russell Westbrook. So, I'm not convinced that ultimately this Clippers team is going to end up, being a team that can really push for the 7 or the 8 out west. But they have a lot of guys they can throw at Russ. They gave OKC some trouble already earlier this year. They're 6th in defensive rating, but they're 3rd in terms of defending around the rim. And obviously we know, especially with how he's shooting the ball right now, Russell Westbrook loves to get to the rim. So, like I said, they've already beaten the Thunder without Russ. They beat the Rockets twice already. This is a little bit more of a difficult matchup, I think, than it looks on the surface.
All right, so you're not thinking he hits that mark?
Gun to my head, I would say under.
Okay, fair enough. Julian, there's not a gun to your head, but please, high or low here, 50 points.
Yeah, Steve Buchanan probably wishes there was. But this was a close one for me as well. If you read my NBA cheat sheet this morning, the matchup is tough against the Clippers. They're a good team, but Avery Bradley hasn't really been playing that much. They rank just 26th against point guards this season. The problem is Westbrook isn't playing that well. It is a low bar, like Matt said, so I think he does go slightly over. But if he goes slightly over, he still might not be reaching value with 51, 52, 53 DK points. So I think Westbrook's an okay play on this slate. I think he's a little bit risky, just considering his status. He's only been back a few games, hasn't played more than 35 minutes yet. I think Chris Paul's a better point guard play on this slate. I think Kemba Walker's a better point guard on this slate. But to answer the question, I do think Westbrook goes over 50.
All right, guys, Kawhi Leonard, 9,500, had 48.25 fantasy points in his last start for Toronto on Friday. He did sit out for rest in between then and now. So, Julian, will he go higher or lower than that tonight versus Philly?
Yeah, it's another pretty spot-on mark for me. I think I'm going to take the under here just because of how well-rounded Toronto's been. They blew out the Bucks last night without Kawhi Leonard. The Bucks obviously didn't have Giannis. That's still pretty impressive. considering how well the Bucks have been playing as a team. So I just feel like the spot right now, Toronto has been resting Kawhi a lot, so I feel like they're not going to want to play him necessarily as many minutes as they may need to. And given the matchup against Philly, who has a lot of different bodies with size to throw at him, I'll take the under here, but I think it's going to be very close.
Nick, what do you think? Over or under?
I'm going under as well. And he's the most expensive the most expensive forward on the board tonight. So it's a little bit risky for me, although, he should be well rested after sitting out last night. I mean, I expect him to play like a superstar. I mean, I think if you're Toronto, you got to be pretty satisfied with how Kawhi Leonard's looked, given how many question marks there were coming into the season. But, getting to 49 fantasy points is a lot for a guy whose highest total on the year thus far is just over 51 fantasy points. He had 51.75 against Minnesota last week. And that was a game in which he went for 35, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals. So, maybe there's room for a few more assists, maybe a couple more rebounds. I think he's hovering closer to 8 per game thus far this season. But 35 points with those defensive numbers from a guy like Kawhi Leonard is about all you can ask. So, certainly he's capable of topping that, but that barely got him to 51 points. So I'll go under against the 7th best defensive team in the league.
Hey, Matt, you want to be the devil's advocate here and go over?
Do it, Matt. You want
All
to do
right,
it?
I'll give it a shot.
Oh!
I mean, I agree with these guys that the under is probably the most likely outcome, but I do think it's close one way or the other. And the one thing that I do like in Kawhi's favor is that I think they're going to lean on him tonight. They just played a back-to-back. They're without OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet, so they're a little bit shorthanded today. So I think that they could lean a little heavier on Kawhi Leonard than normal. The Raps have the highest implied team total on the slate. The slate on this game has risen like crazy since opening up. So even though both of these teams play pretty good defense, Vegas is still expecting scoring in this game. And I think if the Raptors are going to contend, it's going to have to come on the back of Kawhi Leonard.
All right, Nick. Detroit center Andre Drummond. It's going to cost you $8,500. Managed 32 fantasy points against the Celtics on Saturday night. Those two are going to meet again tonight in Boston. Is he going to be higher or lower than that 32-point mark?
I think he's going to go higher. I know he struggled in their last meeting. I know Boston is the best defense in the NBA. Neither of these teams like to push the pace all that much, but I think he's going to get back on track. He played only 29 minutes in that game on Saturday, played less than half of the fourth quarter in a game that Boston ended up winning by 20 and was really out of hand pretty early in the second half. I think Detroit's going to put up a better fight. Blake Griffin certainly didn't play well in that contest. And I think Andre Drummond's going to get back to rebounding really at the rate that we've seen from him, not only earlier this season, but really over the last 3 or 4 seasons. He only had 8 boards in Saturday's game. He's had at least 13 in every other game for Detroit this season. And certainly the Celtics aren't a bad rebounding team in terms of rebounding rates, but they rank 4th in the league as far as the number of rebounds per game that their opponents grab. So, Drummond's the best rebounder, pound for pound, I think, in the league right now. Even if he has an off night scoring, certainly the 3-point shot has not been a weapon for him as he kind of vowed that it would this offseason. I think he'll do enough work on the glass to get over 32 DraftKings points.
Matt, Nick's kind of got me sold on the over here.
Nick's 100% right. I think he smashed the over here. He destroyed the Celtics over the past 3 seasons, just under 47 DraftKings points per game. His minutes last game were limited, and his rebounding total was way below what you would normally expect. I think he averaged like 18 rebounds a game against the Celtics last season. So I'm expecting much more work on the glass. I'm expecting a closer game and more minutes. So I think for sure over 32 here.
Where you going, Jules?
I mean, like we talked about the low bar on Westbrook, this is even a lower bar. This is like less than 4 times value. So, yes, you have to take the over here. I think Andre Drummond is going to surpass that. Andre Drummond, we were talking about his rebounding against Celtics. He had a 22.26 rebound game for 70 DraftKings points against the Celtics last year. So it's too much to expect him not to go over 32, but just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, Andre Drummond did have another game against the Celtics last year where he played 31 minutes and only had 25 DraftKings points. So the Celtics can give him trouble from time to time. He may not be the safest play, but you got to think he's going over 32.
All right, thanks, guys. We're heading back to the NFL, bringing your experts' top choices to pick up off the waiver wire this week, right after Pat Mayo drops some knowledge on you about the Demaryius Thomas trade.
What up, everyone? Pat Mayo here, Pat Mayo Experience. This is going to be a quick little mini update on the waiver wire show from Monday because we got 2 trades so far, at least, to break down. Meanie and I actually talked this one out on the Monday waiver wire show, which I recommend everyone go back and go watch. Well, smashing the like button on this one as well helps keep all this stuff instantaneous and free. But Demaryius Thomas gets traded to Houston for a 4th-round pick. Considering that the Cowboys just spent a 1st-round pick on Amari Cooper. Sounds like bad value on that one. So let's assess this from the Broncos side first. Emmanuel Sanders is beat up with a shoulder injury. He's probably going to end up playing this week. Whether he plays or not, this is going to increase the market share pretty substantially for Courtland Sutton. He's now the #1 waiver wire pickup over Kiki Cutie this week in my rankings. You can find that in the description or updated up on DKPlaybook.com. That will stay updated through all the trades that happen throughout the day. But he is the major one to go get. He's probably got top 30 upside. He's going to have good weeks. He's going to have bad weeks. But with Oakland still on the schedule, there's still some nice matchups upcoming for the Broncos that if you're going to get like 20 to 30% market share in any sort of offense, Case Keenum's not abysmal, so he's going to get him the ball a lot of the time. Plus a very good red zone threat for Case Keenum as opposed to Emmanuel Sanders. So don't expect the world from Courtland Sutton, but a wide receiver 3 with upside the rest of the season is something you can look forward to. That's well worth burning your #1 waiver priority on. For the Texans, with Demaryius Thomas, I honestly think in PPR scoring, as long as they're both healthy the rest of the season, I know Cutie's dealing with a hamstring injury right now, that Keek Da Sneak probably outscores him in PPR formats. DT looks kind of washed. Not going to lie to you. And what we saw in the 3 wide receiver sets when you have Hopkins, Fuller, and Cutie on the field, that we saw a substantial decrease in the target share for Will Fuller, and a lot of those went to Kiki Cutie. I would expect a lot of the same with DT on the outside, that they're just going to pepper Hopkins with the ball. He's going to remain unchanged, and Cutie might end up with more targets, even in a revenge game against Denver this week. I'm not even sure if he ends up playing this week. I'm not sure if Cutie ends up playing this week. But when we're looking at it for the rest of the season, this might be a prime opportunity to sell Demaryius Thomas. Is he a top 30 receiver the rest of the season? I'd probably say no. He might be like 32, he might be 39, 41. I think that Cutie has an easier path to PPR scoring running out of the slot for the Texans than Demaryius Thomas does as a wide receiver 2 on the outside. But I'm running a poll right now on Twitter that you can go see what the people think. Right now, there's still 3 hours left in the poll. We have around 700 votes in that 6 out of 10 people think that Cutie will outscore DT this season. That actually somewhat surprised me. So gauge the market value for Demaryius Thomas. People always get really jazzed whenever anyone gets traded. So that's something to look out for.
Back to football, and we want to know who the top choices to pick up off the waiver wire are this week. Here to give their 2 cents is Steve Buchanan of DK Live and Ryan Collingsworth of the Action Network. Please grab that Action Network app right now. It's available on both iPhones and Androids.
Facts
I'm getting really good at that.
All right, boys, hit us with the top waiver wire option at quarterback. Steve, you're up first.
I mean, obviously, it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. Excuse me. It's hard not to make the switch when your starter threw 4 interceptions in a game, which is 1 less than what your backup has thrown in 5 games this season. I mean, Fitz storms this Bucs team back to an almost amazing comeback against the Bengals, and now draws a really good matchup here against the Panthers. Aside from Week 1, opposing quarterbacks have tossed for at least 2 touchdowns in each game, averaging 261 passing yards. And let's not forget, every game that Fitz has started this season, he's exceeded 400 passing yards. That was against the Saints, Eagles, and Steelers. Not saying he's going to do that here again, but it feels like he's made for this offense. He's done so well when he's started here, but he's going to be the most attractive option on the waiver wire because most likely he was dropped once Winston came back.
Yeah, he's just like 3 interceptions away, though, from them bringing Winston right back.
No, that's okay. We'll take our chances.
Okay, I like it. Where are you going on this one, Ryan?
Yeah, Steve is right. Fitzpatrick's the best upside play that you can realistically get. But as you alluded to, he's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde type guy. He can go for 400 passing yards or 3+ interceptions or both in the same game. But especially streaming quarterbacks with as many as we have on buys, he definitely has by far the best upside. The thing, though, is I think everybody is going to be clamoring to get him. And with that many quarterbacks on buy, there could be plenty of fantasy teams who are trying to get him. So you need a fallback option. My fallback option is Dak Prescott. He has a naturally high floor because of his rushing upside. And then the last 2 weeks that he's played, week 6 and week 7, he's been PPR QB2 and QB8 respectively, which kind of I'm sure shocks a lot of people, but it's because he's averaged 57.5 rushing yards and scored a rushing touchdown in each of those games.
All right, guys.
I was just gonna mention real quick. Yes, Ryan alluded to like all the buys this week. There's six teams on buys.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
That is a lot.
I just had to throw that in there.
Knowing that there are 6 teams on buys, who are you looking at running back, Ryan?
Give me Jalen Richard from the Oakland Raiders. You know, with Marshawn Lynch out essentially for the season with a groin injury, a lot of people were high on Doug Martin, I think for good reason, but Richard definitely proved last game in particular that he's definitely got the receiving role on lock. No Amari Cooper anymore. Jordy Nelson has been a flop. Your next best receiver is like Seth Collins. You got Jared Cook who's killing it, but then Richard over his last 3 games has 7 receptions on average, 50 yards on average, and he's been PPR RB24 in that span. And then just kind of a little toss in. Also look out for Elijah McGuire of the Jets with Bilal Powell out and then Trenton Cannon kind of underwhelming last week.
What about you, Steve? Where are you going with this?
Oh, man, what a terrible segue. I had Trenton Cannon. I mean, but look, he's set up for an excellent matchup against the Dolphins, who are just so poor against the run. They've allowed the most fantasy points in PPR leagues and the second most in standard. And while he's currently listed as the RB2 on this team, he actually ended up out-snapping Crowell last week, 29-25. He does get some targets out of the backfield. He's seen 9 over his past 2 weeks. I mean, matchup-wise, you definitely can't get any better than this going up against the Dolphins. But like Ryan said, Elijah McGuire is in the shadows there. He could end up being active this week. So if he is, McGuire would be the one to go to. But at least as far as Tuesday, Cannon could be the one to take a look at. I mean, he's getting the usage. Like I said, he out-snapped Crowell, so definitely something to watch out for.
Steve, what about if people at home need some wide receiver help?
Yeah, I like Anthony Miller. I mean, he's been seeing a nice bump since Allen Robinson has been out of the mix. Saw 7 targets last week, scored his 3rd touchdown of the year. I mean, even with Robinson in the mix, he still saw 7 targets the week prior as well. I mean, as long as Robinson is out, Miller kind of looks like the guy they're going to be featuring, and he'll get his opportunities when he is. But as I mentioned, even with Robinson in the mix, Miller's still seeing a healthy dose of the target market share there. I think he's someone to look at. He does have a pretty tough schedule ahead of him, but I feel like for wide receivers, at least this week, it's a little bit thin on the waiver wire.
Ryan, who you peeping?
Yeah, Cortland Sutton's the obvious answer here because of the trade, but I'm going to go with Kiki Kuti of the Texans. I know they traded for Demaryius Thomas, and a lot of people, are probably going to be scared about Kuti's usage. But Kuti's a slot guy. Whether it was Sammy Coates on the outside or if it's Demaryius Thomas, his role is pretty stable. He has a 22% team market share since he's kind of been back from the hamstring injury, 7.5 targets per game. And importantly, he's a big play threat. He only has 196 receiving yards in the season, but of them, 135 have come after the catch. Big play upside.
All right, guys, finally, let's talk tight ends. Ryan, who do you like? Tight ends have not been great this season.
No, they haven't, which is why I'm going to go miserably boring here and say Vance McDonald of the Steelers.
Oh.
Importantly for me, if I'm streaming tight ends on a week-to-week basis, I'm not necessarily looking for upside. I'm looking for a high floor. We just saw David Njoku put up a goose egg last week. So in the spirit of that, I want a guy who gives me a reasonable floor, and McDonald is that guy. Since returning from week 2, he's been PPR tight end 12. And then the Steelers offense, I always wanted exposure to because they passed the 5th most in the NFL.
Steve, who are you looking at?
I hate streaming for tight ends. It's like the worst thing to do week to
sorry.
week. But look, I like Hayden Hurst. I mean, he arguably has his best matchup of the season against the Steelers. In PPR leagues, they've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. It was higher before the Browns came around, but they just decided not to target David Njoku. And I heard that's why all the coaches got fired, because Njoku didn't get any targets last week. But look, the Ravens had 99 yards in this matchup already this season, and that was before Hurst was even active. That was when Max Williams just decided to show up for a week and then just disappear again after that matchup. But I think it's worth taking a flyer on. I mean, the Ravens are going to throw in this game. I think Hurst could be set up for a good matchup here.
Guys, take a break. We're going to need you for some over-under coming up. Right now, though, what are we doing? We're going to put the show on ice right after the break. Hockey.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. The clock looks like it's about to strike midnight for Eli Manning with the Giants. New York is currently on their bye week, and when they come back for their Week 10 contest with the 49ers, Eli may be manning the sideline while holding a clipboard. On Monday, head coach Pat Shurmur wouldn't commit to Eli being the starter when they come out of their bye, as he said they'll be evaluating everything on their roster after an abysmal 1-7 start. Manning hasn't been good so far this season, as he's thrown just 8 touchdowns to go along with 6 interceptions and 4 fumbles. The only reason why he hasn't been benched yet, however, is that they really don't have much behind him. New York Post career journeyman Alex Tanney and 4th-round pick Kyle Lauletta. And if the Giants ultimately decide to move on from Eli, it seems like they'll give Lauletta the nod. That is, if he doesn't receive any punishment from the Giants after reportedly being arrested on Tuesday morning after failing to follow directions from a police officer. The Richmond QB has been inactive all season. The promising side for them as it relates to their Week 10 matchup is that the Giants will have ample time to get whoever quarterback they'll start ready to go against the 49ers.
11 games on the fantasy hockey docket tonight. 2 of the best from the Action Network will join us right now to help you figure out who the heck to roster. Hello to Sean Newsham there on the right, Joe Holka on the left. Welcome to the program, boys.
All right, diving right into some NHL price checking. No surprise that Connor McDavid is the highest priced forward on the slate at $8,100 as the Oilers host the Wild. So how confident are you that he's going to return value at that price point, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Connor McDavid quite a bit, and as always, the best player in the league is someone that you always want to target and someone that generally can produce value. Over the last 4 games, he has 21 shots, and he has 4 goals over those games. He's averaging about a goal and 5.5 shots per game. He has 17 points on the season in 10 games, and he's just been on an absolute tear. The matchup isn't quite as great as you would normally want, but with Connor McDavid and how good he's been recently and the fact that he is the best player in the league, I think he's definitely someone that can produce value tonight at that price.
Joe, what do you think? I mean, pretty expensive. Do you want to pay down maybe for somebody else?
Yeah, Sean just dropping the stats today. I like it. This one might surprise him a little bit because typically I pay up for guys like Ovechkin or Patrick Kane, but we just don't have an elite option to pay up for today. So I'm actually fine with McDavid. In this matchup specifically, I mean, he's a 95th percentile Corsi guy over the past month. We know Corsi really matters at the center position. I actually think it's a pretty decent matchup against a Wild team. They've given up the 5th most shots in the league this year, and they've been the 3rd most penalized team in the league as well. So sets up well for more power play opportunities. I'm on board with McDavid today.
All right, well, out on the wing, Joseph, we have one of 5 players in the league to already score 10 goals this season. That would be David Pastrnak. He and the Bruins traveling to Carolina. Do you like Pasta checking in at 7,800 here?
On the other side of things, I'm not going anywhere near a player in this game for 7,800. It's a really slow-paced game. Both teams extremely strong defensively. Carolina's allowed the fewest Corsi for on the entire slate over the past month. Boston's 2nd lowest expectation on the slate for shots. I just think he's too expensive for me.
What about you, Sean? Joe said he's not touching a single player in this game.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in this game either. Sort of like what Joe just talked about is this game is going to have a very slow pace and there's not many shots expected. Carolina has the best Corsi against on the entire slate. They just don't give many shots up despite the fact that they take shots. So if I'm going to be spending $7,800, I would much rather use that salary elsewhere where I might see a bigger up-tempo game or just better goal-scoring chances in general.
All right, guys, time to talk dirty defense. And currently the NHL's top defense, the Coyotes, hosts the Senators. Sean, what do you think of Oliver Ekman-Larsson at 4,800?
I'm a bit torn on this one. It's a great spot for Arizona, and they finally started scoring. They had struggled at the beginning of the season. We're averaging about 0.8 goals per game, and that number's risen all the way to about like 2.6. So they've been on a tear over the last 5 or so games. But Ekman-Larsson, despite getting the minutes in the top power play time, just hasn't been producing the shot volume that I would like to see out of him. And he's not blocking as many shots either. So at that price point, it's a very fair price point, but he just hasn't been producing what I would want from him. But once again, the matchup's really good, so I think he's a good option, but I'm not going to say he's a great one.
Joe, what do you think on this one?
I agree with everything Sean said as far as Ekman-Larsson's shot volume being down where it should be, but I still love the price. Like, just this team in general is definitely trending up, 7th most shots in the league. So we talked about how they just weren't scoring goals earlier in the season, but over their last 5, they've come alive. 4.4 goals per game over their last 5 games. They've been one of the best defensive teams, like you guys mentioned, but I think there's still a lot of room for growth for this offense, and I think Ekman-Larsson's definitely going to be a part of it.
All right, Joe, what between the pipes, Corey Schneider has been activated by the Devils, but Keith Kincaid will get the start tonight at Tampa, $7,300. Is he worth rostering?
Goalie's kind of gross today. I get the intrigue with paying down. That said, I just don't really play goalies that are just massive underdogs on the road. I just think it's a really low floor for Kincaid. New Jersey's given up the 6th fewest shots against this year. I much prefer a guy like Saros for Nashville at a relatively similar price point, who at least is a large home favorite.
All right, how gross are goalies for you, Sean?
Yeah, I would probably even take it even further. Goaltending tonight is just not pretty, and honestly, Kincaid is just not one that I would even consider with all the other bad options that are out there. For me, I would like to look at a bit more at Antti Raanta for Arizona. They're decent-sized favorites, a really solid matchup for them, and I think that he's probably one of the better goaltending options on the slate tonight.
Okay.
All right, guys, slate-approved pick time. Who is your lock of the night, Sean?
For me, I'm going out west to San Jose with Evander Kane. It looks like Joe Thornton may be returning tonight, but regardless, Evander Kane's shot volume is one of the most elite in the league. And the reason his price is at where it is currently is due to him not scoring many goals over the last week or so. The last 7 games, he has no goals, despite his shot volume still being very solid. So I would look for Evander Kane to possibly get on the score sheet tonight, maybe not even once, but twice.
Joe, who you going with?
Yeah, I love Kane as well. Staying on the same team with a pretty similar theme, just a guy that's underperformed a little bit relative to goals with Erik Karlsson. He is back on the first power play unit with Brent Burns. He had 8 shots in the last game, so 5,600. He's obviously one of the most talented offensive defensemen in the entire league. 96th percentile Corsi, 97th power play shots over the past month. So I definitely think he's going to kind of regress back to his mean as far as points. It's a great way to get access to this power play at a discount.
All right, that'll do, my dudes. NBA Tears of Joy with Julian, Nick, and Matt is coming up.
Carolyn Izak in with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Tom Brady is looking forward to Sunday night's game against Aaron Rodgers in the Pack. This makes for an epic quarterback face-off between 2 number 12s. It's nearly a week away, but the great debate on who is the greatest of all time has already started up. Brady said during his interview on sports radio WEEI that he thinks Rodgers' game is inspiring. So there isn't bad blood between these two highly talked about QBs. They actually have been longtime friends sharing Bay Area roots, from overlooked kids to living legends on the field. Week 9 marks the second time they will face each other, adding fuel to this debate, with the last time being 2014, in which Green Bay got the win. The Pats are heading into this game 6-2, and the Pack are 3-3-1. Brady leaves the Packers star in the dust when it comes to Super Bowl rings. He has been the example of consistency, and Rodgers has all of the tools to be the best quarterback. As for price tags this Sunday, Brady gets the win there, coming in at $6,500, while Rodgers is $100 less at $6,400. So good luck and choose wisely. All right, we're back to basketball with DK Live's Julian Edlow, RotoWire's Nick Whalen, and the Action Network's Matt LaMarca.
Tears of Joy is the name of the game. Please help us decide who to roster from the different levels of DraftKings Tiers contest. Matt, talk to me about Tier 3.
I'm going to go with Blake Griffin here. He's been an absolute monster to start the season. You know, he's fully healthy and kind of just reminding everybody about how good he can be and how talented he is when he's actually on the floor. He's definitely due for some regression. Like, he was shooting 55% at the start of the year before putting up a clunker last time against the Celtics. I don't think he's going to get back to what he was doing, you know, those first 4 games or so. But I still think we can expect a much better performance from him tonight than he had in his last contest. He was just 2 or 13 from the field. He also had a season low in rebounds and assists. I don't love targeting players who are facing the Celtics generally. They're arguably the best defensive team in the league, but I think this is a pretty nice buy low opportunity.
Where are you going on this one here, Nick? I think I remember you saying earlier in the show Blake Griffin just wasn't himself when he played the Celtics this weekend.
Right, that Celtics team, I mean, the numbers say they are the best defense in the league, and I know we talked about Andre Drummond maybe hitting the over earlier in the show, but I'm going to go with Hassan Whiteside in this tier. I thought about Tobias Harris, thought about Mike Conley, but Whiteside's coming off his best game of the season against his former team last night against Sacramento. 58.5 DraftKings points in less than 30 minutes of action. That was a game in which he had 6 turnovers, so he ended up kind of hurting himself in that regard. I think Eric Spoelstra is back to trusting Hassan Whiteside. I mean, there was a period last season for a couple months where it looked like his days with the Heat might be done if he didn't have the contract that he has. You know, there's probably a good chance they were looking to move him, but he's back to rebounding well. he's back to being the explosive shot blocker, a guy who's capable of blocking 5-6 shots in a game that he was 2 or 3 years ago. He's got 11 blocks over his last 2 games alone. I know he didn't exactly go off against Charlotte when they played earlier this year, but he only took 6 shots in that game. I'll take my chances with Whiteside going up against the combination of Cody Zeller and Bismack Biyombo, who for some reason is apparently back in that rotation.
Hey, Jules, Tier 3, Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry, Tobias Harris. Is that something you might be interested in?
Yeah, tiers is really difficult tonight, but I thought Tier 3 was actually the easiest one for me, and it's got to be Blake Griffin. Just looking at the rest of the competition there, the other players just aren't as good. Hassan Whiteside and Kyle Lowry, I guess, can get some consideration, but the Raptors are going to be getting Kawhi Leonard back, so Lowry's been overperforming a little bit lately with Kawhi out for 2 games so far this season. Whiteside's got a really good matchup, but I just don't trust him as much as we can trust Blake Griffin. Like Matt said, he was averaging 59 DK points a game prior to that terrible outing against the Celtics. That puts him way out of the class of the rest of the guys in this tier. And yeah, we do have to worry about the matchup with the Celtics, but I don't. Detroit's pretty good. I don't see them getting blown out back-to-back games by the Celtics. They're going to come into this game with a little bit of pride, keep it close. I think Drummond and Griffin are both guys that do a lot better than they did the last time around on Saturday night against the Celtics.
All right, Nick, how about Tier 4?
I'm going to stick with center, go Marc Gasol. Clearly at this point in his career, not the same all-around force that he was in the midst of his prime, but still capable of big nights in certain situations. And I think that this matchup with Washington could be one of them. They are not a good basketball team, I should say right now, speaking of Washington, but they don't really have a real center. Dwight Howard, maybe going to come back on Friday. That's kind of the best case scenario, but for now, they're just riding with Jan Mahimi. And in a lot of ways, I think they're the polar opposite of Memphis. They play at the 3rd fastest pace. They're the 5th worst defense. And most importantly, when you're talking about the opposing center and Gasol, they're the worst rebounding team in the NBA. None of that should be surprising when you look at this front court. Markieff Morris is banged up. The depth behind Jan Mahimi is even scarier. I like Marc Gasol to take advantage of this matchup.
Julian, help the people out with Tier 4.
Yeah, I'm sticking with this game, but I'm going to the other side of it with Bradley Beal. I do like targeting Memphis Grizzlies in this game tonight because the Wizards have just been so terribly defensively and playing so up pace. But I think Beal is his salary came down. I like him a lot in classic mode as well, and that kind of dropped him into this tier of players with his salary coming down due to the matchup against Memphis. But the way Washington has been playing, I think that they kind of dictate the pace and the scoring, and this is going to be a little bit more high scoring of a game. So Beal has been really good on a DK point per minute basis this year, so it's a close point spread. If he's going to play a lot of minutes in this game, he should score a lot of DraftKings points. And no Markieff Morris, so there's a little bit more offense. Kelly Oubre, who was questionable, he is going to play, but maybe he's not himself, and that leads to more production for Bradley Beal.
Hey, Matt, help the people out with Tier 4.
I'm going to swing for the fences a little bit here. I'm going with Trae Young, who is definitely a boomer bust type of guy. I mean, he's had 3 straight, subpar games, but I just love this matchup against the Cavaliers. They've been the worst defensive team in the league this season, to the point that Ty Lue is now gone. And Atlanta's playing at the fastest pace in the league. So we've got a team that could potentially get a ton of possessions against an awful defense, which is really appealing for me. Trae Young dropped 60 DK points on them in their first meeting this season. I think that even though he's played reduced minutes recently, if he's playing well, I think that they will ride him a little bit harder than they have been. So I just think he has a really elite ceiling in this spot, considering the other players that are in his tier.
Julian, taking a look at Tier 5, who is your guy?
This is the most difficult tier, I think, on this
Why
slate.
is that, Julian? Why is that?
Because all these plays are so close. I know that I went with Goran Dragic pre-show, so I'm sure we're going to run some pretty pictures on him or something. But Willie Cauley-Stein, Jason Tatum, Larry Nance Jr. without Kevin Love, and CJ McCollum are all good plays in this tier. So I think Dragic against the Charlotte Hornets, they haven't been playing great defense. It's a good matchup against Kemba Walker. Could be a high-scoring game. Dragic is the guy that I was going with when I first looked at this. But if you're playing multiple lineups in tiers, I think there's 4 or 5 guys that you have to consider here.
Waylon, who are you considering?
Yeah, I narrowed it down to Cauley Stein going up against Orlando and CJ McCollum, but I already talked about 2 centers, so let's stick with McCollum. Off to a bit of a rough start across the board. He's shooting under 40% from the floor. He's had more than 2 assists in a game just once so far, so really hasn't quite looked like himself. But Houston's one of the worst defenses in the league. Obviously, they don't have James Harden. I really like this matchup, not only for CJ McCollum, but for Portland as a whole from a DFS perspective. Houston's dead last in opponent field goal percentage within 3 feet of the rim. McCollum, obviously one of the best in the league at getting to the rim. I think this is a matchup he should be able to take advantage of. And for McCollum, I've watched a few of the Blazers games. The shots have been there. His usage rate is almost identical to his number from last season. It's not like he's playing any differently. The shots, it really seems like just aren't falling. I don't think he's going to be due for a Klay Thompson-like correction, as we saw last night. But you look at last year's numbers, you look at the numbers from the previous seasons, it's pretty clear that McCollum is capable of quite a bit more. And, I think this night could be the beginning of what could end up being kind of a longer-term breakout for him.
Matthew, Julian really struggled to find a player here. Was it that hard for you?
I'm always struggling, Emerson.
Yes, I know. I work with you quite frequently here in the DK offices. You look okay today.
Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Matthew. Sorry about the interruption.
No worries. I narrowed it down to the same 2 guys as Nick. For me, it's either between Willie Cauley-Stein or McCollum. I think both guys are fine plays. I will probably side with Cauley-Stein here. I think he's got a wider range of outcomes for sure. We've seen the Sacramento Kings just fluctuate their minutes at the forward and center positions pretty much on a nightly basis. So there's no guarantee that Cauley-Stein will play big minutes, but he's been absolutely dominant over the past 2 games. He's put up over 45 DK points in both. He's averaging approximately 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. So if he does see, the 35 minutes or so that he has been seeing, 32 to 35 minutes, I think his ceiling, again, is probably higher than anyone else's in this tier.
All right. Now we need those slate-approved picks.
Yeah, that's important.
So, Julian, who's your lock for the night?
Yeah, my slate-approved pick here, I didn't struggle with quite as much. I'm going to go with Chris Paul. These situations with James Harden out of the lineup don't come about all that often. So much extra usage on the board. I think there's a lot of really good plays on this slate, but I'm going to anchor my lineup around Chris Paul.
Nick, slate approved.
I'm going to go in a completely different direction. Can't believe I'm saying this. But in terms of value, give me Nemanja Bjelica. 5,700 against a Magic team that I trust even less than I trust the Sacramento Kings. Should he be playing over Harry Giles? Should he be playing over Marvin Bagley? Probably not. But he's racked up at least 40 DraftKings points each of his last 3 games. He's bombing away from 3, and he's playing a ton of minutes. So Nemanja Bjelica at 5,700.
And action, Matt LaMarca, wrap us up.
I'm going way down. I don't care if you're playing 1 lineup, 10 lineups, 1,000 lineups. Just hit the lock button on Pascal Siakam.
Yep.
He's a fantasy point per minute type of guy, priced at just 3,900. He should see over 30 minutes tonight for the shorthanded Raptors. He put up, 40 essentially last night in the same situation. Obviously they will have Kawhi Leonard back tonight, but Siakam is a guy who doesn't need to score to hit value, although he can do that as well. So it's too easy of a play. It's a free square. You got to plug him.
Jules, sounds like that has your seal of approval.
Pascal Siakam was going to be my guy. I thought I'd go a little more traditional with Chris Paul, but he really helps you afford Chris Paul, so great guy to slot into your lineups.
Or Russell Westbrook.
Or Russell Westbrook, who you probably shouldn't play. You should play Chris Paul instead.
Okay, we will see who is right come morning. Thank you, squad. Good stuff as always. All of you watching at home, we'll be right back with more football talk. Last block of the show.
Tyler Sullivan here with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. The Los Angeles Rams may be getting one of their more lethal pass catchers back for Week 9. Rams head coach Sean McVay announced on Monday that wideout Cooper Kupp has a very good chance of returning to game action on Sunday when they face the New Orleans Saints. Kupp has missed the last 2 games after leaving LA's Week 6 contest with the Broncos due to a knee injury. And despite being carted off in that contest, Kupp's injury wasn't as serious as initially thought, and now it appears like he's on the verge of getting back inside the loaded Rams offense. Before the injury, Kupp was in the midst of a breakout 2018 campaign, averaging 6 catches and around 88 yards over his first 5 games. The wideout's also been a strong red zone target for Jared Goff. He's caught 7 of his 10 targets in the red area for 42 yards and 3 touchdowns. On Sunday's slate, Kupp is pricing in at $6K and has a pretty favorable matchup against the Saints secondary, who just let Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen both go for over 100 yards receiving and a score on Sunday Night Football.
All right, the boys are back. Bukes is back, as is Ryan Collinsworth of the Action Network. Stone cold. Right there, you can see it on his face. And we've got ourselves a third wheel, folks. TSN's Andy McNamara. Welcome aboard, mate.
And we have you all here.
Everybody's great. Thanks for asking.
Gang's all here.
No one usually asks us how we are, Steve.
I care.
Wow, this is new for us. Okay,
this is new. Like, what do I do with my hands?
I don't know, but we do have you all here for one thing, and one thing only, other than asking us how we are. NFL over/under. So, Steve, you're a seasoned vet. You're up first. Cam Newton, 6,600, has 3 straight games with 24-plus fantasy points. So will he go over or under that total in Week 9 versus the Bucs?
I mean, I'd really be interested to hear an argument of how he's going to go under in this matchup here. I mean, on a week-to-week basis, I feel like we haven't really talked about Cam Newton at all this season, and he's quietly been so solid across the board. He's been under 20 DK fantasy points only twice this season, averaging 235 passing yards, 44 rushing yards a game, and has thrown at least 2 touchdowns in every game but one this season. I don't know. Are we forgetting this is the Tampa Bay defense? I mean, come on. You think this is the week all of a sudden they're going to fix things and shut down this Panthers offense? It's not going to happen. This is over.
Okay, so Ryan, I think you could tell from those air quotes, he means he doesn't think the defense is very good. So are you also going to go over?
I am, because I agree the Tampa Bay defense is horrible. It's a twofold thing. 1, their defense sucks. 2, their offense is so pass dependent. They have no ability to run the ball, and now Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be slinging it. And there's going to be plenty of possessions for Carolina. Whether Tampa Bay is scoring or turning the ball over, it kind of doesn't matter. With them throwing so much, the pace of the game is going to be rapid enough that Carolina is going to get plenty of possessions. So I'm going over on this too. Plus, Gerald McCoy is still nagging injury.
Hey, Andy, now that you've seen how this thing, works, you going over or under 24 DK fantasy points?
Yeah, I'm with the guys. You got to go over. And not just because Tampa Bay's defense is god-awful. It's because Cam Newton has been clicking, right, consistently, 200-plus yards passing, 2 touchdowns a game, and he can put up points with his feet. Cam Newton is playing at a stud level, and Tampa Bay sucks. That's a combo for 24, 25, 30 fantasy points, no problem.
All right, Le'Veon Bell 2.0, also known as James Conner, will cost you $7,200. 31-plus fantasy points in each of his last 3 games, but will he be able to hit 25 points this weekend in a matchup with the Ravens defense? Andy?
No. He cools off here. Week 4, he played Baltimore, 9.4 DK fantasy points, okay? Ravens defense best against the run. I'm not saying he won't have a good day. He just won't have a great day and go over that 20-plus point mark. I think he'll be in the teens. But Baltimore's defense is no joke, guys, especially on the run side. They just keep doing it, and they've seen Connor before, and they've shut him down. So I'm going to take the under.
Okay, so where do you sit on this one, Ryan?
I'm there too. I'm going under. I don't feel confident that he's even going to have a good game, which I know is a bit of a hot take, but bear with me here. 94% of Connor's rushing production this season has come against the Browns twice, Tampa Bay, who we just maligned, the Falcons, who are almost as bad, and the Bengals. Those are not good defenses, especially run defenses. And then in the 2 games where the Pittsburgh Steelers played good competition, the Chiefs and the Ravens, 17 total carries, 38 total rushing yards. I'm concerned by that.
Steve, over 25 fantasy points for Connor. You brave enough to go there?
No, I can't do it either. I mean, honestly, this is a tough week for running backs. It feels like overall, from top to bottom, I mean, I look at Adrian Peterson, I'm like, wow, he looks really enticing again this week. I mean, look, we saw him get, Andy said, we saw him get 9 carries for 19 yards against this team once already, only scored 9.4 DK fantasy points. I mean, you can even go as far as that Connor is probably not even a cash play this week. He's a GPP play only, which is crazy to think about with all the production he's done. I mean, look, this is a defense that's already shut down Alvin Kamara. This is a defense that's already shut down Christian McCaffrey, which isn't as hard, but still, they did it. I mean, look, can we say that he can hit it? Yes, he could hit it. I mean, Connor has shown the abilities that he can have these huge games here, but I don't think this is the week where he's going to bust through one of those tough defenses. Do it. Baltimore is the real deal, especially when it comes to plays on the ground. So I'm going to go under on this one.
Hey, Ryan, wide receiver Keenan Allen, 7,300, has only managed to hit 15-plus DK fantasy points once in his last 6 games. But can he hit that mark this week against the league's third-best pass defense in Seattle?
All of Allen's advanced metrics says that he should be producing at a much, much greater rate than he is. And it's not just about his touchdowns. Like, sure, he only has 1 receiving touchdown this season. That's low even for him, but he's never been a touchdown-reliant guy. He tends to be a volume kind of receiver. I can't fully understand why he's not performing to expectation, but I do know that this matchup against the Seahawks isn't favorable. They're only, averaging 13.4 receptions and 148 yards to receivers on the season. They're the third-ranked pass defense by Football Outsiders DVOA. They're like one of the worst teams in the NFL in terms of pace. They want to slow the game down and run the ball a lot, so limited scoring opportunities, and it's just straight up difficult to play in Seattle.
All right, Andy, what do you think? I mean, can he do it?
No, he can't. And it's not just because of the touchdowns either, but he's just had the 1 since week 1, and even with the volume and that prolific offense, it seems everybody's eating except for Keenan Allen. It's very strange, and he hasn't hit the mark yet. So no, like, this isn't the Legion of Boom. Okay, I understand that it's not the historically good defense, but it's still pretty damn good. And I don't think this is the week for a Keenan Allen burst out.
Hey, Steve, nobody's got any faith here. What do you think? Over, under 15?
What, do you think you're going to get the faith from me? Because you're not. I mean, look, I'm honestly surprised that Allen is priced as high as he is at this juncture. I mean, do you want to pay for Allen in this spot or pay $300 less for, say, Robert Woods against the Saints? What about $300 more, get Michael Thomas against the Rams? Allen is sandwiched in between these guys, and it's nuts that you would even consider it. I mean, look, he's been good, but it's been nothing great. I mean, he's supposed to be the wide receiver 1, and he's been probably 2, 3 at this point. He's not even getting the most red zone targets at this point. That belongs to Mike Williams. It's not a huge difference, but it's a slight enough difference that Allen is not the number 1 guy in the red zone right now. I'll take a hard pass on this one.
All right, well, let's go to the position that I think has been trash this season. We talked about it earlier in the show. Tight ends. Jordan Reed, $4,800, managed to stay healthy, which is good for him, but hasn't been overly productive. He's averaging only 9.2 fantasy points a game. Can he hit 15 points, which would be a season high on Sunday as the Skins host the Falcons' porous defense? Steven?
You know, I kept hearing year after year, oh, give Jordan Reed a full season. He'll be fantastic. He's going to crush it. Okay, well, here it is. And guess what? He's not doing anything. He's actually been one of the Redskins that have been healthy all season long, and he's been doing nothing with the opportunities. He's making the receptions, which for a PPR site is great, but he's just not doing anything with them once he gets them. Has only 137 yards after the catch, which would rank him 10th in the league right now. But you do have to like this matchup against the Falcons. They're all banged up. They have been all season long, and he's the 2nd most expensive tight end on the slate. But that's because it's an $1,800 difference between him and Travis Kelce. So while he's the 2nd most expensive, he's really not too expensive for the matchup here. So I'm going to give him a shot here. And if he doesn't produce here, then I'm done. Like, he's on the list. He's never going to come back again. So that's it. But if there's going to be a game where he could actually start doing something, this would probably be the one.
Yeah, Ryan, he makes a lot of good points here, man. It seems like he's in a good spot to finally break out.
Steve is way more gracious than I am. This is a very hard pass, but like the same energy, I know I don't show it on my face, the same energy that he showed for Keenan Allen, that's how I feel. I'm telling you because I know I'm not showing it. In our models, he's got the 3rd best median projection among tight ends. 3rd best. And that's still 4 points lower than this prop. It's 11. Like, last week he had 12 targets. You know how many yards he had with those 12 targets?
How many?
38.
Oh.
That's ridiculous. You can't keep doing this to me. You have Alex Smith, who does nothing but throw short to intermediate. He feeds tight ends. He feeds running backs. And it's just not happening. And then for the actual matchup on the field, the Falcons, while they have sucked defensively, they particularly are bad against running backs, not against tight ends. So Steve alluded to this earlier, but I think this is a Peterson spot. Chris Thompson to a lesser extent. I don't have any faith in Reed here.
All right, 1 minute warning, 1 minute left in the show. Andy, do you hate Jordan Reed as much as Ryan does?
I do, because finally, yes, he's healthy. All these short yard opportunities, he's textbook for Alex Smith. He's perfect, and he is not delivering at all. And that's saying it nicely. Dude hasn't hit 15 fantasy points all year. Until he does, I'm not taking that number. Under on Jordan Reed.
All right, guys, we appreciate the time as always and the knowledge. This has been The Sweat. I'm Jessie. He's Emerson. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. with
and
more.
That's Halloween.
Halloween. It is Halloween. So we'll be tricking or treating here on The Sweat.
I'll be treating.
I'll be tricking tomorrow.